The night had grown colder than anyone expected for early autumn in New England. The small coastal town, with its neat rows of houses, shuttered shops, and silent streets, looked almost picturesque under the glow of amber streets. But for a girl with no roof over her head, the charm of the town meant nothing. Every gust of wind cut into her like a blade. Every empty window reminded her of what she didn't have. Her name was Emily Carter, a 17-year-old who had been running from life for far too long. She clutched her torn backpack as if it were the last thread holding her together. Inside were scraps of her existence, an old photograph of her mother before she died, a worn sweater, and a notebook filled with scribbled dreams that seemed further away with every passing day. Emily had no one. Her father had vanished when she was little, leaving behind debts and broken promises. Foster care had chewed her up and spit her out. By the time she was 16, she had learned to stop expecting kindness. Kindness, in her world, was a luxury reserved for others. Survival was her only reality. Tonight, though, survival meant finding somewhere where to sleep. The park bench where she had spent the last 2 nights was now watched closely by the local police. The bus station, her occasional refuge, had locked its doors. The shelters were full. And so, Emily wandered. That was when she stumbled into the wealthy part of town. The houses here were nothing like the cramped apartments she had once known. These were mansions, each sitting behind iron gates, with driveways that stretched like private roads. Their windows glowed with warmth, laughter, and the kind of life Emily had never tasted. She should have felt anger, but she didn't. What she felt was exhaustion. Her sneakers, split at the seams, dragged across the sidewalk until she saw it. The largest house on the street. White columns, sprawling lawns, lights still on, even after midnight. But what caught her eye wasn't the house itself. It was the doghouse near the side yard. It was bigger than some sheds she'd slept in before. Fresh hay lined the ground, and the scent of cedarwood drifted out. It was clearly built for a large dog, maybe 2. To Emily, it looked like heaven. She stood at the gate, trembling. The rational part of her mind told her to keep walking. No rich man in America was going to let a dirty, ragged girl crawl into his doghouse. But desperation silenced rationality. She pressed the buzzer at the gate, her breath fogging the cold air. For a long moment, nothing happened. She almost turned to leave. Then, lights flickered on across the front of the mansion. A camera above the gate adjusted, focusing on her. Emily lowered her eyes, humiliated but determined. She whispered to herself, "It's just a night. Just one night." Inside that mansion lived Michael Harrington, a man the newspapers called a self-made millionaire. In truth, his wealth had multiplied into billions through real estate and tech investments. He was the kind of man who appeared on magazine covers, who people quoted when talking about the American dream. But behind his success was a life of solitude. His wife had passed away years earlier, and his only son studied overseas. The mansion, for all its grandeur, was a hollow shell filled with silence. Michael had been awake, working in his study, when the buzzer rang. At first, annoyance crossed his face. Midnight visitors in his world usually meant emergencies or unwanted drama. But when he glanced at the security monitor, his expression shifted. On the screen stood a girl, thin, frail, her shoulders hunched beneath a faded hoodie. She looked like the kind of soul the city had forgotten, swallowed by the cracks of society. And then he heard her voice through the intercom, trembling but steady. "Please, sir, can I sleep in your doghouse tonight?" The request stunned him. Not the mansion, not the guest house, not even a spot on the porch. The doghouse. Michael leaned closer to the monitor. He had spent years watching people beg for opportunities, money, jobs, but never for a scrap of dignity like this. Something about her eyes, even through the grainy camera lens, held his attention. They weren't eyes of a con artist or a beggar chasing pity. They were eyes of someone who had nothing left to lose, and yet carried a spark of stubborn will. For a long moment, he didn't move. He could have pressed a button to dismiss her. He could have told security to chase her off the property. That was what most millionaires would have done. But Michael Harrington wasn't most men. Emily stood at the gate, shivering, ready to collapse. She expected rejection. She had lived her whole life bracing for it. But when the intercom crackled again, a voice, deep and calm, spoke words she would never forget. And with that, the story of a girl who begged for a doghouse and a man who shocked the world with his answer truly began. For a moment, silence stretched across the cold night air. Emily gripped the straps of her backpack, half expecting to hear the sharp buzz of rejection, the gate clicking shut, and the house returning to its quiet indifference. That was how life usually worked, doors closed, and she was left outside. But instead, the intercom crackled again. A voice came through, measured, deliberate, carrying the kind of authority that made her straighten instinctively. "Stay where you are," it said, but her heart skipped. She didn't know if that meant help was coming or trouble, but she was too tired to run. Her knees felt like water. Within minutes, the front door of the mansion swung open. A man appeared, tall and broad-shouldered, his silver hair catching the glow of the porch light. He wasn't dressed like the images she'd seen of him on magazine covers. There was no expensive suit tonight, just a dark sweater and jeans. Yet, even in simplicity, he carried the unmistakable air of power. Michael Harrington walked down the stone path toward the gate, his footsteps steady, eyes fixed on the girl who had interrupted his midnight solitude. When he reached the gate, he studied her, this fragile figure who looked more ghost than human. Shivering in the biting cold, Emily's lips trembled as she tried to explain herself before he could dismiss her. "I don't want trouble, I swear. I just need a place to close my eyes. I saw the doghouse. It looked warm. That's all I'm asking." Michael didn't respond immediately. Instead, he pressed a code into the gate's panel. The iron bars slid open with a low hum. "Come in," he said. The words stunned her more than rejection would have. She hesitated, glancing at the mansion, then back at him. "I can just stay in the doghouse." "Sir, I don't want to bother. Come in," he repeated. Firmer this time, Emily swallowed hard and stepped past the threshold, into a world she had only seen from the outside. The gravel crunched beneath her worn sneakers as she followed him up the path. Each step felt unreal, like she was trespassing into a dream she didn't belong to. Inside, the mansion's warmth wrapped around her instantly. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and faint cologne. A grand chandelier glimmered above the entryway, casting golden light across marble floors. Emily's breath caught. Never in her life had she been surrounded by such beauty. Yet instead of comfort, shame twisted inside her. Her clothes were dirty, her hair unkempt, her very presence felt like an insult to such a home. Michael noticed. He noticed everything. The way her eyes darted around, not in greed, but in disbelief. The way she kept her arms close, as if afraid she might break something. The way she seemed half ready to bolt even as exhaustion dragged her down. "Sit," he instructed, gesturing toward a chair near the entry table. Emily obeyed, lowering herself carefully as if the chair might reject her too. Her backpack stayed clutched in her lap, a shield between her and this intimidating new world. Michael disappeared into another room for a moment. When he returned, he carried a folded blanket and a glass of water. He placed them in front of her without ceremony. "Drink," he said. Her hands trembled as she lifted the glass. The water was cold, clear, and tasted purer than anything she'd had in days. She sipped slowly, savoring it, while Michael studied her in silence. Finally, he asked, "How old are you?" 17, she whispered. "And where should you be tonight?" Instead of asking to sleep in a doghouse, the question broke her composure. Her throat tightened, eyes burning as she forced words out. "I don't have anywhere, no home, no family, just nowhere." Michael leaned back, his face unreadable. In his world, people often lied, exaggerated, twisted their stories for sympathy. But he had built an empire on reading people, and one thing was clear to him. Now this girl wasn't lying. Every crack in her voice, every guarded glance, carried the weight of truth. He could have stopped there. He could have called the police, the shelters, washed his hands of her, but instead, something stirred deep inside him, a memory of his own beginnings. The nights when he had slept in his beat-up car, hustling to prove himself, when the world dismissed him as just another kid with nothing. The difference was, he'd found breaks along the way. People who opened doors. This girl had found nothing but closed ones. "Listen carefully," Michael said at last. "You won't be sleeping in my doghouse. That's not happening." Emily's heart sank. She nodded quickly, embarrassed, ready to stand and leave. But then his next words stopped her cold. "You'll sleep in the guest wing. It's warm, it's safe, and tomorrow, we'll figure out what to do next." Emily stared at him, wide-eyed, unable to process what she'd just heard. The guest wing, she didn't even know what that meant, but it sounded like something reserved for royalty. Not for a girl like her. Her voice cracked. Why would you help me?" Michael's gaze softened, though his tone remained steady, because no one should ever have to beg for a doghouse. And in that single moment, her world began to change. The guest wing of Michael Harrington's mansion was larger than most apartments in the city. A long corridor stretched outward, lined with paintings and soft rugs that cushioned every step. At the far end, a set of double doors opened into a room bathed in golden lamplight, with a bed so wide and soft it looked like a cloud suspended above the earth. Emily froze in the doorway. The sight overwhelmed her senses. The room smelled faintly of lavender, the sheets were crisp, the curtains flowed like silk waterfalls. A fireplace glowed gently in the corner, chasing away the chill of the outside night. She had asked for a doghouse, and now she stood in a room fit for someone she could never imagine becoming. Michael gestured toward the bed. "You'll stay here tonight. There's a bathroom through that door. Towels in the cabinet. Clothes, we'll figure out in the morning." Emily nodded quickly, clutching her backpack tighter. Her heart pounded as if she had just broken into someone else's life and would be caught at any moment. Michael lingered at the door for a moment, studying her unease. He had housed business partners, celebrities, diplomats, but never had he seen someone look so terrified of comfort. "You're safe here," he said, almost gently. "Lock the door if you need to. No one will disturb you." And then he turned, leaving her alone. The silence that followed felt heavier than noise. Emily stood frozen, not daring to move, until finally she crossed the room and sat on the very edge of the bed. The mattress dipped beneath her weight, softer than anything she had ever touched. For a long moment, she simply stared. Unable to believe it was real. She removed her sneakers slowly, embarrassed by the dirt clinging to them, and set them neatly by the door. Her backpack stayed within reach, a lifeline she refused to let go of. Even as she curled beneath the heavy quilt, she kept one hand on it, as if it were the last piece of her world. Sleep didn't come easily. Every creak of the house, every flicker of the fire made her jump. She was too used to danger, too trained by the streets to trust silence. Yet exhaustion eventually pulled her under, and for the first time in months, Emily slept without fear of being woken by sirens, strangers, or the bite of cold concrete. Morning arrived quietly. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, warming the room. Emily stirred, disoriented, half expecting to find herself back on a park bench. But when her eyes opened, the room was still there, impossibly beautiful and real. She sat up slowly, rubbing her eyes. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel something dangerous. Hope. A knock at the door startled her. She jumped, clutching her backpack like a shield. "Breakfast is ready," a voice said. It wasn't Michael's. It was softer, female, with a professional calm. Emily hesitated before opening the door. Standing there was a middle-aged woman in a crisp uniform. Clara, the Harrington housekeeper. Her expression was polite but not warm. Her eyes flickered with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity as they scanned Emily from head to toe. "This way," Clara said, her tone giving nothing away. Emily followed nervously through the mansion's endless halls until they reached the dining room. The table stretched nearly 20 feet, set with silverware that gleamed beneath a chandelier. At one end sat Michael, sipping coffee and reading a newspaper. He looked up as Emily entered. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. The place setting in front of her held eggs, toast, fresh fruit, and orange juice. To Emily, it looked like a feast. She lowered herself carefully into the chair, unsure if she was even allowed to touch it. Michael folded his newspaper, watching her eat. Her stomach growled in betrayal, and with trembling hands, she picked up her fork. The first bite nearly made her cry. She hadn't tasted food like this in months. She ate slowly at first, aware of Clara's sharp gaze from the corner of the room. But hunger overcame caution, and soon she was eating with quiet desperation. Michael said nothing, letting her finish. Only when she pushed the plate away did he speak. "So," he said, voice steady, "tell me the truth. Who are you running from?" The question pierced her like a blade. She looked down at her lap, her fingers tightening around the fabric of her jeans. "I'm not running from anyone," she whispered. "I'm just running." Michael didn't press further, though he knew there was more. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, studying her carefully. He had seen broken people before: business rivals after bankruptcy, investors after failure. But this girl's brokenness was different. It wasn't greed or pride that had shattered her. It was neglect, the kind of neglect that came from being invisible to the world. "Then here's what we'll do," Michael said at last. "You'll stay here for a few days, get cleaned up, get some rest. After that, we'll talk about next steps." Emily's head snapped up, eyes wide. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. No one had ever offered her more than a night on a couch, a meal at best. And here was a man who owed her nothing, giving her days. Her voice cracked. "Why me?" Michael's gaze was steady, almost unreadable. "Because once, a long time ago, I asked for help too, and someone gave me a chance." Emily stared at him, her chest tightening. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust this unexpected lifeline. But deep down, a voice whispered the same warning it always did. "Don't trust anyone. Don't let your guard down." Still, for the first time in years, that voice didn't feel as strong. And as she sat in the mansion of a millionaire, eating breakfast she never dreamed she'd taste, Emily realized her story had only just begun. For the next 2 days, Emily moved through the mansion like a ghost who didn't quite belong. She stayed mostly in the guest wing, only venturing out when Clara or one of the staff called her for meals. Every corner of the Harrington estate dazzled her: the wide staircases, the polished floors, the grand piano that no one seemed to touch. But instead of joy, it filled her with unease. She wasn't used to comfort. Comfort had always come with strings attached, with favors demanded later. And though Michael Harrington hadn't asked for anything in return, Emily couldn't silence the voice in her head warning her that nobody gave something for nothing. The staff reinforced that fear. Clara, especially, never hid her suspicion. The housekeeper had been with Michael for nearly 15 years. Loyal as family, and she didn't like strangers slipping into his world. Each time Emily entered a room, Clara's eyes followed, sharp as needles. At breakfast on the third morning, the tension boiled over. Emily had been pouring herself a glass of juice when Clara spoke from across the kitchen island. "People like you don't just wander into places like this," she said, her tone measured but cold. "What are you really after?" Emily froze, her hand tightening around the glass. She turned slowly, meeting Clara's eyes. "I'm not after anything," she said softly. I just needed somewhere to sleep." Clara didn't look convinced. "I've seen it before. Girls with stories. They come with nothing, leave with jewelry, or worse." The words stung, not because they weren't believable, but because they echoed every suspicion Emily knew people already had of her. She wanted to argue, to defend herself, but instead, she dropped her gaze. "I'm not like that," she whispered, before Clara could respond. Michael entered. He carried himself with the calm authority of a man used to commanding boardrooms. Yet his eyes caught the unspoken tension instantly. "Clara," he said evenly, "Emily is my guest. Treat her as such." Clara's lips pressed into a thin line, but she said nothing more. She returned to her work, her silence louder than words. Emily's stomach twisted. She hated being the cause of friction, especially in a house where she already felt like an intruder. But Michael gave her no room to shrink back. "Eat," he told her, taking his seat at the table. She obeyed, though each bite tasted like guilt. Later that day, Michael called her into his study. The room was lined with shelves of leather-bound books, awards, and photographs of his past ventures. On the desk lay neat stacks of documents, a laptop glowing with numbers that meant little to her. Michael leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "You've been here 3 nights," he said. "You've eaten, slept, had safety. Now, I want to see something." Emily's throat tightened. "What do you mean?" He reached into a drawer and pulled out an envelope. He set it on the desk between them. "Inside is $500, he said. "I'm giving it to you. Take it, if you want. No conditions." Emily's breath caught. $500 was more than she'd seen at once in her life. With that kind of money, she could buy food, clothes, even a bus ticket out of town. Her fingers twitched with temptation, but something felt off. Her eyes lifted to his, and she realized this was not just generosity, it was a test. She shook her head slowly. "I can't take that." Michael studied her calmly. "Why not?" Because I didn't come here for money. I came because I had nowhere else to go. If I take it, it'll look like that's all I wanted." For the first time since she'd met him, a small flicker of a smile touched Michael's lips. He slid the envelope back into the drawer. "Good," he said. "I needed to know that." Relief washed over her, but confusion too. He had been testing her in somehow. She'd passed. Michael leaned forward, his voice steady. "I've built a life where everyone wants something from me. Money, power, influence. But you asked for the one thing nobody else ever has: a doghouse. That tells me more about your character than anything else. Don't prove me wrong." Emily swallowed hard, nodding. "I won't." He dismissed her with a wave, but as she left the study, something shifted inside her. For the first time in years, someone had given her not just a chance at survival but a chance at trust. Yet, outside those mansion walls, whispers were already beginning. The neighbors had noticed the strange girl coming and going. Some claimed she was Michael's secret relative, others that she was a scam artist who had tricked her way in. And the media, always hungry for a story, was closer than anyone realized to discovering the truth. Emily's fragile peace was about to be tested in ways she never imagined. By the end of the week, the Harrington mansion no longer felt like a sanctuary hidden from the world. Whispers had escaped the gates, slithering into the manicured lawns of neighbors and echoing across the town like wildfire. The first sign came when Emily stepped outside one morning to breathe fresh air. She stood on the back patio, staring at the wide gardens, when she noticed a woman across the street. The woman, dressed in designer clothes, paused mid-jog and openly stared. Her phone rose slowly, the camera clicking as it captured Emily's presence. Emily froze. Her chest tightened. She wasn't used to being noticed, and when she was, it rarely meant anything good. She hurried back inside, her pulse racing. Later that day, Michael received a phone call that lasted barely 3 minutes. When he hung up, his jaw was set tighter than usual. "What's wrong?" Emily asked quietly. He glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Nothing you need to worry about." But she knew. The neighbors were talking. 2 days later, the story reached the tabloids. "Mysterious girl spotted at billionaire Michael Harrington's mansion," read the headline. The article speculated wildly. Was she a long-lost relative, a secret mistress, or a runaway heiress hiding under his protection? Paparazzi swarmed the front gates, cameras flashing whenever anyone entered or left. Inside the mansion, the tension thickened. Clara, already suspicious, now treated Emily with open disdain. At breakfast, her movements grew sharper, her words colder. "You've brought nothing but trouble into this house," Clara muttered one morning as she cleared dishes. "Do you realize what people are saying about him because of you?" Emily's throat tightened. She hadn't asked for this. She had begged only for a doghouse. Now, somehow, she was being painted as a scandal. That afternoon, Michael called her into the study again. He stood by the window, looking out at the reporters camped near the gate. "They're going to keep digging," he said. "They'll invent stories if they can't find the truth. That's how this game works." Emily lowered her eyes. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean for any of this." Michael turned to face her. "I know you didn't, but intent doesn't stop consequences." His tone wasn't angry, but it was firm. For the first time, Emily felt the weight of what it meant to live in a world where every move was scrutinized. Michael studied her for a long moment, then asked the question that had been circling his mind since the night she arrived. Why should I keep you here? Give me one reason I shouldn't send you to a shelter tomorrow and put an end to all of this." Emily's chest clenched. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her mind scrambled for words, but none seemed strong enough. Finally, she spoke from the only place she knew, her heart. "Because I don't need your money. I don't need your mansion. I just need someone to believe I'm not nothing. And if you send me away now, I'll go back to being nothing." Silence filled the room, the kind of silence that pressed on the soul. Michael's eyes softened, though his expression remained stern. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he returned to his desk, picked up a pen, and began writing something on a notepad. "You're staying," he said at last. "But understand this, Emily, the world will test you. They'll try to break you down. If you crumble, they win. If you stand tall, you prove them wrong. Which are you going to be?" Emily swallowed hard, her voice steady despite the storm in her chest. "I'll stand tall." Michael nodded once, as if satisfied. "Then let's begin proving it." And so, for the first time in her life, Emily wasn't just fighting to survive. She was fighting to be seen, to be worthy of the chance she'd been given. But outside those mansion walls, the storm was only beginning to rage. The following week, Michael received an invitation to a dinner hosted by one of his oldest business partners. Normally, these evenings were routine, a mix of networking, subtle negotiations, and flaunting wealth. But this time, Michael made an unusual choice. He looked across the table at Emily, who was nervously folding the corner of a napkin. "You're coming with me," he said. Emily's eyes widened. "Me too, a dinner." Michael's tone was calm, but firm. "If you're going to live under this roof, you need to learn what it means to stand under the same scrutiny I do. The world is already talking about you. It's time you see it for yourself." Emily's stomach flipped. The thought of sitting in a glittering ballroom, surrounded by billionaires and socialites, made her want to disappear into the floor. But she didn't argue. Somewhere deep inside, she wanted to prove she belonged, even if she didn't quite believe it yet. The night of the dinner, Clara helped prepare her. Begrudgingly, but with skilled hands, she styled Emily's hair and slipped her into a pale blue gown from the Harrington collection. The girl who had once begged for a place in a doghouse now stood in front of a mirror, nearly unrecognizable. Yet Emily saw the truth. Behind the silken curls, her eyes still carried the weariness of alleyways and cold nights. "Don't slouch," Clara muttered, fastening the necklace. "And don't say anything foolish. They'll eat you alive if you do." Emily nodded, though her heart pounded like a drum. The dinner was held in a chandelier-lit hall, filled with laughter and the clinking of champagne glasses. When Michael entered with Emily at his side, heads turned immediately. Whispers rippled across the room. "Is that her? The girl living in his house? She looks so ordinary." Emily felt their stares burn into her skin. She wanted to shrink, to fade into the marble floors, but Michael's steady presence anchored her. His hand rested lightly at her back, guiding her forward. They were seated at a long table draped in white linen. Across from them sat Richard Beaumont, one of Michael's wealthiest associates, a man with silver hair, a sharp suit, and eyes that gleamed with judgment. The meal began pleasantly enough, with small talk and polite laughter, but it wasn't long before the questions came. "So, Emily," Richard said, swirling his wine glass, "tell me, what school did you attend? Harvard, Yale?" Emily hesitated. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I didn't." Richard's brow arched. "Oh, then where did you study?" Her throat tightened. "I didn't study anywhere. I never had the chance." A murmur passed down the table. One woman covered her smile with her hand. Another man chuckled softly, shaking his head. Richard leaned back, smirking. "Fascinating. A girl with no education, sitting at a table of tycoons. How refreshing." His tone dripped with sarcasm. Emily's cheeks burned. She glanced at Michael, but he remained silent, watching her carefully. This was her moment, her test. Taking a shaky breath, Emily lifted her chin. "Maybe I don't have your schools. Maybe I don't speak your language, but I know what it feels like to be hungry. I know what it means to fight for every breath. And I know one thing, none of your degrees can teach gratitude." The table went still. The laughter faded. For a brief moment, even Richard had no reply. Then, slowly, Michael smiled. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it carried pride. Across the room, whispers began again, but this time, the tone had shifted. Some looked at Emily with curiosity, others with a spark of respect. She had not just survived the evening, she had claimed her place at the table. And Michael Harrington knew then. The girl who once begged for his doghouse might very well belong in his world after all. The dinner had ended, but the ripples it created did not. Within days, Emily's name, once unknown to anyone beyond the cold streets she slept on, began appearing in headlines. Who was the mystery girl at Michael Harrington's side, from rags to riches, or a scandal in the making? Some praised her courage. Others mocked her. Talk shows debated whether Michael had lost his mind by letting a homeless girl into his mansion. But behind the noise, something darker stirred. Michael's world was not just built on wealth. It was built on power, alliances, and enemies who waited for any crack to widen. And Emily, unknowingly, had become that crack. One evening, Michael sat in his study with two of his most trusted advisors. Emily lingered at the doorway, unnoticed at first, until she heard her name. "They're already digging," one advisor said. "Your competitors hired investigators. They want everything on her, where she's from, what she's done. Any mistake they can twist into scandal." Michael's voice was cold. "They'll find nothing. She's not what they think she is." But Emily knew better. She carried secrets not of crimes, but of survival. Nights when she stole bread from convenience stores to stay alive. Moments of weakness she'd buried in shame. If those stories surfaced, would they be twisted into weapons against the man who had given her a chance? She stepped back quietly, her heart sinking. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. The mansion felt too large, the silence too heavy. She wandered into the garden, staring up at the stars that once comforted her. When she lay on cardboard under bridges, the question clawed at her chest. Was she helping Michael, or destroying him? The next morning, she tried to speak. "Michael," she began softly, as they shared coffee in the sunlit kitchen. "Maybe it's better if I leave, before things get worse." He looked up, his gaze sharp. "Is that what you want?" Her lips trembled. "I don't want to hurt you. They'll use me against you." Michael leaned forward, his voice steady but fierce. "Emily, listen to me. My enemies will always find something to use. If it wasn't you, it would be something else. You think walking away protects me? No, it only proves them right, that you don't belong here, and I won't let them decide that." Tears burned in her eyes, but his conviction wrapped around her like armor. 2 days later, the attack came. A tabloid splashed across its front page. "Doghouse girl exposed, her shocking past revealed." The article twisted half-truths into poison. It claimed Emily had been arrested, though it was only a misunderstanding when she stole food as a starving teenager. It suggested she had ties to dangerous people on the streets. Photos of her ragged and dirty from her worst days filled the internet. The public gasped. Some turned against her, calling her a fraud. Others defended her, saying she was proof that people could rise from nothing. But Michael did not flinch. When reporters swarmed him outside his office, shouting questions about Emily's past, he stopped, faced the cameras, and said only one thing: "She is stronger than any of you will ever know, and she is exactly where she belongs." Inside the mansion, Emily watched the news clip with shaking hands. For the first time, she realized Michael wasn't just protecting her. He was fighting for her, and maybe, just maybe, it was time she stopped running from her past and started owning it. The tabloids had thrown fire on her past, but Emily knew the worst was yet to come, and she was right. 3 days after the scandal broke, a familiar face appeared at the Harrington gates. He wasn't dressed in a suit like the reporters, nor did he carry a camera. Instead, he wore the same tattered jacket he'd had years ago, the one Emily remembered from the nights they huddled near dumpsters to stay warm. His name was Kyle. To outsiders, he was just another drifter, but to Emily, he was the ghost of everything she'd tried to leave behind. The guards stopped him, of course, but Kyle wasn't there for the mansion. He was there for her. When Emily heard his name from the staff, her blood went cold. Memories came flooding back, the hunger, the fear, the mistakes they'd made together when survival mattered more than right or wrong. That night, unable to sleep, she went down to the garden and found him waiting beyond the gate. "Emily," Kyle called softly, gripping the iron bars. "So, it's true, you're living with him?" Her heart pounded. "Why are you here?" He gave a bitter laugh. "Why do you think? The whole world's talking about you. The girl who begged for scraps, now living like a queen. Meanwhile, I'm still out here. Don't you think you owe me something?" Emily flinched. "I don't owe you. We both made choices." Kaya's eyes darkened. "No, you left. You got lucky. And now, you're nothing without your rich friend. But me, I've got stories. Stories the world would pay to hear. About the girl in the doghouse. About what she did to survive." Her stomach turned to stone. She knew exactly what he meant. He was threatening to sell her past, exaggerated, twist it, destroy her name completely. The next day, Michael noticed her silence. Over breakfast, he set his coffee cup down and studied her face. "Who was he?" he asked quietly. Emily froze. "Who?" "The man at the gate last night." His tone wasn't angry, but there was no use lying. She sighed, her voice trembling. "Someone from my past. He knows things, Michael, things I'm not proud of, and he'll use them to ruin you." Michael leaned back, eyes narrowing. "Then let him try. I don't build my life on what others think." But Emily shook her head. "It's not just about you anymore. It's about me. I can't hide forever." For the first time since she'd entered his home, she realized something. If she didn't face her past now, she would always be at its mercy. That evening, Emily went back to the gates. Kyle was waiting again, smirking as if he'd already won. "You ready to pay up?" he asked. Emily lifted her chin, her voice stronger than she felt. "No, I'm ready to tell the truth. All of it, before you twist it into lies." Kyle blinked, caught off guard. "You wouldn't." "I will," she interrupted, her hands trembling, but her words firm. "Yes, I stole food when I was starving. Yes, I slept in alleys, begged strangers, Even asked for a place in a doghouse. That's my story. And if people want to laugh, let them, because at least it's real. Her voice cracked, but she didn't back down. For the first time, she wasn't running. She was standing. Kyle's smirk faded. The power he thought he held slipped through his fingers, leaving him with nothing but his bitterness. That night, Emily sat across from Michael in the study. I told him everything, she admitted, and I'll tell the world if I have to. I can't let shame hold me hostage anymore. Michael studied her quietly, then gave the faintest smile. That's the difference between surviving and living. Emily, you've just chosen to live. And in that moment, for the first time in her life, Emily felt free. For days, Emily wrestled with the decision. Hiding had always been her instincts. Silence was safer. Shadows were safer. But Kyle's threats, the tabloids, the whispers, they had cornered her into a choice. Either keep running from the past or step into the light and claim it as her own. Michael gave her that choice in the simplest of ways. An interview, he said one evening, his tone steady but his eyes searching hers. A chance to speak in your own words. No filters, no tabloids twisting it, just you telling the truth. Emily froze. Her chest tightened. The idea of sitting in front of cameras, of millions watching her every expression, terrified her. But then she thought of the girl she had been, the one begging strangers for scraps, the one begging Michael for a place in a doghouse. That girl had survived. Maybe now, it was time to do more than survive. She nodded. I'll do it. The day of the interview arrived. A small studio had been set up in one of the quieter wings of the Harrington estate. Lights glowed hot against her skin, and cameras hovered like silent predators. Across from her sat a respected journalist, a woman known for her sharp but fair questions. Emily's hands trembled in her lap as the countdown began. 3, 2, 1. The red light blinked on dot at first. The questions were gentle. Where had she come from? How had she met Michael Harrington? What was it like to suddenly live in a mansion after having nothing? Emily answered carefully, her voice soft but growing steadier with each word. Then came the harder questions, the ones she had feared most. Is it true you were arrested for theft? Her throat tightened, but she forced herself to look straight into the camera. Yes, I was 16. I stole food, not because I wanted to, but because I hadn't eaten in days. That doesn't excuse it, but it's the truth. Were you homeless? Yes, for years. I slept in alleys, in abandoned buildings. Even asked once if I could stay in someone's doghouse. That's how low I'd fallen, and that's how desperate I was to survive. The room was silent except for her voice. Emily took a shaky breath, but she didn't stop. I'm not proud of those years, but I won't hide them anymore, because those struggles made me who I am. And if my story makes even one person believe they can climb out of the dark too, then it's worth every whisper, every headline, every laugh at my expense. Tears shimmered in her eyes, but she didn't look away from the camera. She had nothing left to fear. When the interview ended, silence hung in the air. Then the journalist, usually so composed, leaned forward and said softly, "Thank you for your honesty, for your courage." Emily exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The broadcast went live that evening. Within hours, the reaction exploded. Across America, people watched the girl who once begged for scraps speak with raw honesty. Some wept, remembering their own struggles. Others sent messages of support, flooding social media with hashtags like #EmilyStrong and #Doghouse2Dreams. Even critics who had mocked her before were silenced, at least for the moment. Inside the Harrington mansion, Emily sat with Michael on the couch, scrolling through the messages. Tears streamed down her face, not of shame, but of relief. They don't hate me, she whispered. They actually understand. Michael's hand rested on hers, warm and steady. Of course they do, because you gave them the one thing money can't buy. Ruth. For the first time, Emily realized she had not just stepped out of the shadows. She had lit a fire, one that could not be put out. The interview changed everything. Emily had walked into the studio, trembling with fear, but she walked out with the strength she never knew she had. By the next morning, her face was on every screen in America. Talk shows replayed her words. News anchors called her the girl who refused to hide. And across social media, her story became a rallying cry for anyone who had ever been broken, dismissed, or forgotten. If she can rise from a doghouse to a mansion, maybe I can rise too. Emily's story saved me tonight. I was ready to give up. The comments poured in by the thousands. But for every person who celebrated her, another scoffed, she's a fraud. She's just using him. Poor little sob story. Must be nice to cry your way into a billionaire's arms. Michael read some of those comments late into the night, his jaw tight. He had lived long enough in the public eye to know that fame was a double-edged sword. For Emily, though it was brand new and dangerous. One evening, just days after the interview, a sleek black car slowed outside the Harrington gates. Inside sat Victor Crane, one of Michael's fiercest rivals in business, a man known for smiling while he destroyed. His assistant leaned forward. "Sir, do you want me to arrange a meeting with her? She's vulnerable right now. Public opinion could swing either way." Victor smirked, his eyes fixed on the mansion. Not yet. Let her shine a little brighter. Then we'll see how easy it is to snuff out the flame. Inside the mansion, Emily sat in the library, scrolling through messages. One in particular caught her eye. It was from a woman named Linda in Ohio. I watched your interview with my daughter. She's been bullied for years, told she'd never amount to anything. Tonight, for the first time, she said, if Emily can keep going, so can I. Thank you. Tears blurred Emily's vision. She set the phone down and whispered to herself, if I can give hope to even one person, maybe all of this was worth it. Michael stepped into the room then, watching her quietly. You've started something bigger than you realize, he said. She looked up, confusion flickering in her eyes. What do you mean? He walked closer, lowering his voice. Hope is powerful, Emily, but power attracts enemies. They'll try to use you, twist you, break you. You need to be ready. Her heart pounded, but she nodded. Then teach me. I don't want to be just the girl in your story, Michael. I want to write my own. For the first time, Michael saw not just the fragile girl he had taken in, but a woman stepping into her own strength. The world was watching now. Some wanted her to rise, others wanted her to fall, but Emily Harrington, no longer the girl begging for a doghouse, was ready to fight for her place in the world. And little did she know, the biggest test of her courage was still to come. The day Victor Crane struck, the world felt heavier. It started with a viral video, a manipulative montage stitched together from Emily's past. Grainy footage of alleyways, snippets of her stealing food for survival, and audio clips twisted out of context. The headline screamed, "The Doghouse Girl Exposed, is Michael Harrington protecting a fraud?" Emily watched it in silence, her stomach twisting. Her heart raced. She wanted to run, to hide beneath the covers, to go back to the shadows she had spent her entire life in, but Michael's presence beside her anchored her. He didn't speak immediately. Instead, he took her hand, his grip firm. "This is not who you are," he said quietly. "It's what they want you to be. Don't let them decide your story." By noon, the story had exploded. Reporters camped outside the mansion. Phones rang constantly. Social media algorithms amplified Victor Crane's smear campaign. Headlines alternated between mockery and outrage. Emily felt the sting of betrayal from people she didn't even know. Friends of her past, neighbors, strangers, all questioning, judging, labeling her. She wanted to curl up and disappear, but she in single quotes T. Michael led her to the study. He pulled out a camera and tripod. "It's time," he said. "You're going to speak. Directly. Not through the media, not through someone else. You're going to tell the truth, your truth, and the world will listen." The recording began. Emily's hands shook, but she held her chin high. "I am Emily Harrington," she began, her voice steadying with each word. "I was hungry. I was cold. I was invisible to the world. Yes, I made mistakes. I stole food to survive. I begged for help when I had nowhere else to go. But none of that defines who I am today." She paused, letting the words sink in. "I am not a fraud. I am a survivor. And today, I choose to stand, not just for myself, but for everyone who has been told they don't matter." Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't stop. "I will not let lies decide my life. I will not let fear control me, and I will not let anyone take away the chance to be more than they were yesterday." The silence after her words was deafening. The video was uploaded immediately. Within hours, it went viral. Millions of people across the country watched her story unfold in her own voice, raw and unfiltered. Hashtags like #EmilySpeaks, #DogHouseToDreams, and #Unbreakable Emily flooded social media. Victor Crane's montage crumbled under the weight of authenticity. People began posting side-by-side comparisons, highlighting the lies and manipulation. Public sentiment shifted almost overnight. Even Michael's competitors paused, realizing that no smear campaign could overshadow courage, truth, and vulnerability. That night, Emily sat with Michael on the balcony. The city lights glittered like stars below, but her gaze was fixed on the horizon. "You did it," Michael said softly. Emily exhaled, exhaustion and relief mingling. "No, we did it." He nodded, his arm around her shoulder. "You faced your past, your fears, and the world. And you didn't flinch. That's real strength, Emily. Not money, not fame. Strength is standing when the world wants you to fall." For the first time, Emily felt truly powerful, not because of the mansion, the media attention, or Michael's protection, but because she had reclaimed her own story. And as the night deepened, Emily realized something profound. She had not just survived the storm, she had become the storm itself, unpredictable, unbreakable, unstoppable. The weeks that followed the viral video were unlike anything Emily had ever experienced. Letters arrived daily from people she had never met thanking her for speaking out, sharing their own struggles, asking for advice, or simply expressing hope. Schools invited her to speak to students. Community centers asked her to mentor kids who were growing up in circumstances she once knew all too well. For the first time, Emily felt her life had meaning beyond survival. Inside the mansion, the atmosphere had changed too. Clara, once suspicious and cold, now watched Emily with a quiet respect. Even the staff began to treat her as part of the family. Michael, who had always been a man of action rather than sentiment, finally allowed himself to show pride openly. "You've done more than I imagined," he said one evening as they walked through the gardens. "You've inspired a nation and changed lives, and you've done it without losing yourself." Emily smiled, the weight of months of fear and shame lifting from her shoulders. "I couldn't have done it without you." Michael shook his head. "No, you did it all yourself. I only gave you the chance." Public perception shifted completely. Articles praising her courage replaced the attacks. Talk shows invited her to speak about resilience, the power of truth, and how she refused to be defined by her past. And through it all, Emily remained herself, the girl who once begged for a place in a doghouse, the girl who had dared to believe someone might care, the girl who had found the courage to stand in the light. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped behind the mansion, Emily stood on the balcony overlooking the city. Michael joined her, handing her a cup of tea. "Do you ever think about your old life?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "All the time, but I don't regret it anymore. It made me who I am." Michael looked at her, a rare softness in his eyes. "And who you are is remarkable." Emily smiled. "I guess asking for a doghouse wasn't the worst thing I ever did." Michael chuckled. "Not at all. In fact, it might have been the bravest." The mansion no longer felt like a cage, nor did it feel like a fortress against the world. It was a place of new beginnings, a home for someone who had once had none. Emily Harrington had gone from the cold streets to a mansion, from fear to courage, from silence to a voice that resonated with millions. And in that transformation, she realized something even greater than survival. She had discovered the power to rewrite her story, not just for herself, but for anyone who had ever been told they didn't matter. She had been seen, she had been heard, and she had finally belonged. The end. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon because more stories of courage, sacrifice, and hidden strength are on the way.